Have you ever wondered why Cyberpunk, one of the most immersive games ever made, and whose developers firmly refuse to add a third-person perspective, ends with a final scene where the camera suddenly pulls back to show V from afar? No matter which ending you get, the game's last moments always break immersion and show V in third person. This is especially striking since it's the only time in the entire game we step outside the first-person view and see the protagonist from a new angle. So why is that? Why would CD Projekt insist on keeping us locked in V's head for the whole journey, only to take that away in the last few minutes, separating us from the character we've embodied for so long? In video games, switching from first to third person signals a major shift, from immersion to observation, from agency to detachment. Consider the Temperance ending, where V chooses to hand over their body to Johnny, who then leaves Night City. When the camera shows Johnny at a distance from us, it feels fleeting. The moment V let go of their body, we as players let go too. It now belongs to Johnny, who's beginning a new life we are not meant to follow. The shift in perspective captures that absence, of V and of us. It's a bittersweet ending, beautiful in that Johnny breaks free from Night City, but also sad in that V and the player are gone, and the camera subtly makes us feel that. But Cyberpunk's use of third person in the final moments reveals more than just absence. It also signals a split within V's identity, no longer perceived from the inside, but now seen from the outside. Take the star ending, for example. The distance created by the camera helps us understand something important. V no longer needs us. They've accepted the time they have left and are determined to live it fully, alongside their new family. V has matured enough to leave Night City behind, but also enough to leave us behind. The 6 months they have left are theirs, and theirs alone. In that sense, the third-person view represents a kind of freedom. Freedom from interference, from the city, from corporations, and from us. It also reflects V's inner shift. Earlier V was consumed by ambition, chasing power at Night City. Now they've stopped thinking only about themselves. Their perspective has widened, from an individualist one to something communal. That change in mindset is mirrored in the final shot, which isn't about me anymore, but the we in We Are Going Home. Depending on the ending, the distant camera and shift in perspective lead to drastically different outcomes. In the Devil ending, V places our trust in Arasaka to remove the engram, signing a contract that promises salvation, but instead leads to their soul being digitized, trapped in cyberspace. The final shot reflects this, a portrait of V, framed this way to emphasize their expression. Fear, regret, and resignation are etched across their face as they press their pendant to their chest, a gesture symbolizing their surrender to the death they know is inevitable. That said, if we choose not to sign the contract, the scene shifts entirely. In a moment of defiance, they rip off their pendant, rejecting servitude and the fear of death while reclaiming their freedom. Even more striking is a Path of Least Resistance ending, where V chooses to end their journey on their own terms. The camera pulls back again, but this time it retreats even further than usual. We don't see V die, we only hear the shot, while the last image we get is a panorama of Night City, and that increased distance is meaningful. It suggests V dies in obscurity, their final act swallowed by the city's indifference. The skyline becomes the last witness to their defeat. Night City, then, has the last word. This stands in sharp contrast to the Temperance and Star endings, where the final moments show either V or Johnny up until the very end, because they're still in control. But in Path of Least Resistance, as the name implies, V no longer fights. They give in to the city, which ultimately decides how and when the curtain drops. The tower ending available with Phantom Liberty also speaks volumes about the relationship between the player and V. After undergoing surgery to remove the relic, V wakes up 2 years later, alive but permanently unable to use cyberware. The operation was a success, but it came at a cost. Following a last conversation with Misty, the camera pulls back and shows V fading into the crowd, now just another face in Night City. Many players see this as a tragic ending. V has lost everything that mattered to them, and returns not as a legend, but as a nobody. The way this is filmed reinforces that idea. V is framed as an ordinary person, a passerby with no more tragic stories to tell. Notice how, in the final shot, the camera is positioned at shoulder height. This is no coincidence. The camera distancing itself from the protagonists, while maintaining that grounded, eye-level point of view, relegates us to nothing more than a spectator. to a person in a crowd watching their friend walk away. The precise positioning of the camera and third-person perspective makes it so that we too, like V, become another passerby, quietly blending into the city. Let me clarify something important. The moment we're separated from V coincides with the end of the game and with our own return to ordinary life, after such an intense and unforgettable journey. That's part of why this ending hits so hard. It doesn't just pull us away from V, it reminds us that, like them, we're heading back to something quieter, more grounded. We too rejoin the crowd, and with it, the chance of living a life that suddenly feels smaller. In a way, the final shot ends without V, who continues on a path we can no longer follow, but also without us, who get to do the same. The ending's perspective, then, is crafted in a way so that the game says goodbye to its protagonists, but also to us, the players. Some might be skeptical of this interpretation, but think about the title of the ending, The Tower. In tarot, the tower signifies sudden, often disruptive change, and even the destruction of long-held beliefs or structures.
The tower. You and everyone around you will experience a great shock. When the tower falls, nothing will be the same again. Nothing at all.
It can represent a forced awakening, revealing truths that shatter illusions and whose message can be liberating, urging individuals to confront uncomfortable realities. In the case of V, the metaphor is clear, but the tower applies to us too, in that it shatters the immersion the game so carefully built, and in doing so it forces us, just like V, to return to a more realistic life with its share of good and bad. Now, it's crucial to consider Cyberpunk's most radical choice, excluding us from the ending and from V's future. While each ending offers unique details, they all share one thing in common: a shift to third-person perspective. No matter what fate awaits V, no matter the choices we made, we players are left behind at the end. The reason for this separation has to do with something that goes beyond the content of each ending. In fact, it has to do with CD Projekt needing to reclaim V, and in doing so, to provide the protagonist with a sense of self separated from Johnny and from us. I believe that the developers, by switching to the third person in the last few minutes, demonstrated how respectful they were in regard to their protagonist. By pulling the camera away from V, the developers acknowledged the necessity for V's story arc and long-winded fight to come to a close, whatever that close looks like, whether hopeful or grim. What matters most is to give V, and to some extent Johnny, a proper send-off. By ending in third person, V's story becomes a legend, just as V always wanted.
Night City will have its new legend. Deserves it. I deserve it.
For context, third-person perspective is often used in art to elevate a story to myth or legend. In The Witcher 3, for example, the story focuses on Geralt, his relationship with Ciri, with Jennifer, Triss, and many others. The game isn't about the player's journey, it's about Geralt's story, one we witness as spectators. The same is true for Arthur in Red Dead Redemption 2, whose narrative arc is nothing less than a legendary tale we remember for its power and depth. This is the purpose of the third person, and it's why Cyberpunk switches to it in its final scene. In doing so, the game propels V into the realm of legends. We ought to ponder, then, over the fact that the developers could have adopted a third-person camera throughout the game in order to make V a character like Geralt or Arthur, but the use of first-person offers a much stronger immersion. It also shapes Cyberpunk as a picaresque story, that is, a genre famous for its first-person narration, recounting the story of a rogue but likable hero who lives in a corrupt society. In addition, first person gives players a unique, direct view of Night City through their own eyes, and not filtered through a specific character. This way, we too get crushed by the city, we too feel like a cog in a corporate machine, which the story echoes perfectly. Cyberpunk works best in first person because it wants the player to experience this dystopia intimately, to feel the weight of corruption up close. In other words, Night City is the star of the show, until the very end when the spotlight finally shifts to V, and the game asks us to see them not as an extension of ourselves, but as a distinct person. Framing V in third person during those last few minutes doesn't just grant them space to reflect on all that's transpired, it grants us that same space. Suddenly, we're no longer participants, but observers, left aside to consider everything that led us here. It's a calm, contemplative rupture, a separation that invites introspection, not just about V's future, but also about our own role in their story. Contrast this with a game like BioShock, which ends with a narrator explaining what happened to us, never breaking the illusory bond between player and protagonist. BioShock, for better or worse, hands us a straightforward conclusion. The story is neatly wrapped, the meaning delivered, and already digested for us. Cyberpunk, by contrast, withholds that closure. It refuses to speak for V, or for us. Instead, the distant camera provides a space in which we can come to our own conclusion. In doing so, it gives us something rare, a moment of silence, wide enough for both V and the player to disappear into and think. Last, but certainly not least, another crucial element worth analyzing comes straight from Cyberpunk's quest director Pavel Sasko, who describes V's story as one about terminal illness and the struggle that comes with it.
What Gene talked about is like the cancer a treatment that he was going through, and the fact that, how Cyberpunk actually tells the story about inevitable end, and how it is for you to actually define what you are going to do about that, and how you're going to tackle this. And that was always like our kind of goal and idea, out of many other things, obviously, right?
With that in mind, the powerlessness we feel when we're separated from V at the end may mirror the powerlessness V feels throughout the game, facing a condition they can cure, or if they can, like in a tower ending, it comes at a heavy cost. Consider how V, because of Johnny's engram, is gradually severed from their own body. The illness metaphor captures what it means to lose control of your body to a foreign force that devours it, a force out of one's control. And something similar happens to us when the camera shifts. We too are separated from the body we once controlled. We too feel powerless, even if for a brief moment. As such, the separation between V and the player helps us understand V better. Weirdly enough, it's when the game ends, when we're pulled away from V, that we understand them the most. For a few minutes, we get to see their pain, their hope, their anger, their resolve, and to see these emotions for what they really are. V's emotions, not ours. The final scenes set up the stage for us to realize that V's life and story extend much beyond our involvement over the course of the game. Once the perspective shifts, V's story no longer resides within us, but beyond us. Earlier, we saw how the third-person view helps frame V as a myth, a legend. But if that's the case, what do we make of the Sun ending? In it, V survives the assault on Arasaka, now owns the afterlife, and finally makes it big, just as they always dreamed about. But it's not enough. They choose to take on one final mission, infiltrating the Crystal Palace, a space station orbiting Earth where the richest people and most powerful corporations reside. At this point, V is already a legend, long before the credits roll. So why did the developers switch to third person again? Why not let us remain inside the legend we helped build? To understand why, we need to look closely at the final cutscene, starting with the last shot. V's grimace, lips peeling back just enough to reveal clenched teeth. They are visibly angry, and the game chooses to end on that anger. Interestingly, now that Johnny is gone, and we're gone too, removed by the shift in perspective, V appears completely alone. That loneliness is reinforced by the setting, floating in space, far from everyone. At this point, the third-person camera isn't used to elevate V into legend. They've already reached that status. Instead, it serves to show just how isolated they've become, locked into a life that now feels like a march toward vengeance. The name of the ending, the Sun, along with the risky and probably last mission to the Crystal Palace, clearly recalls the myth of Icarus. In the myth, Daedalus and his son Icarus escaped their prison with wings made of wax and feathers. But Icarus, driven by overconfidence, flies too close to the sun. His wings melt and he falls to his death. What's often forgotten about Icarus is that before his fall, he was just a boy filled with ambition, someone who dreamed of a life bigger than the one he had. He may have been naive, but his desire to become something more was sincere, even endearing. Still, the myth only tells us about his final moments, the folly, the flights, the failure, and in the end, we don't remember Icarus as the hopeful dreamer he once was. We remember the tragedy and the fall. His story became a cautionary tale, stripped of the ambition that made him interesting in the first place. And it's precisely what happens to V in the Sun ending. Even if they've already become a legend, the final moments focus not on their triumph, but on what might be their downfall, the parts that people will remember most. Notice how the Sun ending doesn't show us V basking in fame or ruling over Night City, their victory in hand. Instead, the ending opens in an intimate manner, with V either alone or alongside their partner. No celebration, no spectacle. The focus isn't on what V gained, but on what they're about to lose. Like Icarus, V won't be remembered for their ambition or the dreams that once drove them, but for the fatal choice to reach too far. Just before launching the assault on the Crystal Palace, V tells Mr. Blue Eyes they have nothing to lose, making it clear they don't care if they die.
Times when I had something to gain are long gone. Now I got nothing to lose.
It's that same overconfidence, hubris, that brought Icarus down. And V shares it, especially in the way they talk themselves up before the mission begins.
Won't be disappointed. Pick the best merc around for the job.
One final detail stands out just before the ending cuts to black. We see V propelling themselves toward the orbital station. At first, they appear upright in a frame, but then the camera begins to rotate, slowly turning until V is upside down. That simple shift visually signals a reversal. V is no longer rising, but falling. The camera doesn't just show movement, it shows a descent. V's final act isn't framed as a heroic climb, but as the beginning of a fall. In the end, it's a shift to third person that cements V's legacy, not as the legend who conquered Night City, but as someone brought down by their own ambition. It's not everything we did with them that gets remembered, it's this moment, V, angry and alone, drifting through space. Just like Icarus, they appear to grow wings. Notice how the gas coming from the thrusters is visible on both sides of the spacesuit, as if to draw a pair of wings with which V dashes toward the station. But it's not a symbol of triumph. It's a warning. The final shot leaves us with a clear image, not of a legend who toppled corporations, but of someone who flew too close to the sun. It's curious, isn't it? CD Projekt flatly refused to add a third-person mode in Cyberpunk, yet they break their own rule in the final minutes. It's a bold move, a surprising one in a story so committed to showing the world strictly through V's eyes. But that's the point. The moment the camera steps back and stops letting us be V, they stop being just an avatar through which we get to experience Night City. With that deliberate change in perspective, V becomes something else entirely, a fully realized character with a life of their own, finally recognized as a deep, endearing, complex protagonist that they are. The cost of this recognition is our removal from V's tale. We become observers, bearing witness to the rise of a memorable video game character we helped shape, but who now exists beyond us. This subtle change in perspective is rare in games, and it's worth highlighting because it elevates Cyberpunk to new heights. As the camera pulls back, it gives us a chance to reflect on our playthrough, on the choices that led us here. By stepping away from V, the game creates space to observe the consequences of our actions. In that final moment, the frame becomes a photograph, holding the weight of all we went through together. In other words, this distant and photographic viewpoint helps create memory. The memory of someone who thrived and fell in Night City. The memory of someone who, despite their many flaws, we cannot help but admire, because there's a bit of all of us in them. Finally, the memory of someone who, in the concluding scene, is no longer just V, but Vincent and Valerie. As always, thank you for watching my analysis of Cyberpunk. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and liking the video. I'll see you in the next one.